These are the knockouts that sprung up out of nowhere, the finishes that left us all with our jaws on the floor. Here are the greatest flash knockouts in MMA. Most people remember Fedor Emelianenko's fight with Andrei Arlovski for its finish, but a lot of people forget just how much success Andrei was having early. In the opening exchanges of that round, it really did seem as though Emelianenko was struggling with his opponent's speed. Even the commentator made that exact point, just seconds before Arlovski vaulted into a flying knee. Somehow Fedor had the perfect counter, catching the pitbull with a huge overhand punch to put his lights out. It was a KO that really did come against the fight's rhythm. But if there's one thing that remained constant through Emelianenko's reign, it was that he knew how to win and could always be counted on for moments like this. Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler I was one of the most underrated fights in the history of the UFC. People really read this one wrong on paper. In their eyes, it was the KO ability of Lawler versus the grappling of Diaz. But when Nick got in that cage and started talking wild trash to Robbie mid-fight, what followed was truly shocking. All of a sudden, the 20-year-old Diaz was outboxing this future champion, provoking him all the while with constant taunting. Then, in the second round, it happened. Lawler got himself countered by a clean hook, dropping face first to the canvas. Sure, Nick was doing very well, but this KO shot came out of nowhere. Little did he know that Diaz had just managed to crack one of MMA's most legendary chins. Fabricio Werdum is an undeniably great fighter, but let's be real, his game plan against Stipe Miocic was totally insane. Facing the best counterpuncher in the division, Werdum, being the crazy fighter he is, decided to run headfirst into a counter that briefly dazed him. Instead of learning from his mistake, Fabricio proceeded to resume running at Stipe in wild fashion, and this time, the exact same punch KO'd him there and then. And with that, Miocic became the heavyweight champion. But you do have to wonder what was going through Werdum's head. Maybe he could have used that legendary BJJ of his, you know? But no, he decided to try his hand at short-distance sprinting inside the cage, and lost his belt in the process. People used to really sleep on Kamaru Usman's striking, or at the very least his stand-up game just wasn't at a level that was comparable to his wrestling. But when he took on the famously iron-chinned Jorge Masvidal in a rematch of their first fight, that all changed. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was a straight-up striker versus wrestler kind of affair. But when Jorge got a little too overconfident on the feet, Usman exploded with one of the single hardest punches in UFC history, shattering Jorge's legendary chin for a KO victory that finally saw the world sit up and respect his power. As good a one-punch finish as the Octagon has ever seen. On any list of flash KOs, if you don't give a mention to this absolute shocker from Anthony Showtime Pettis, Pettis was losing pretty decisively to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Getting a taste of his own medicine as Wonderboy made his levels clear. But Pettis is a great striker in his own right, and while he couldn't match Thompson blow for blow, all he needed was one perfect opening to steal all of his opponent's momentum. Pressed up against the cage at the end of the round, Showtime delivered an insane Superman punch that cracked Thompson right on his jaw. It was a KO that came totally at odds with our expectations. And as we said, Wonderboy was doing great work up until, well, he wasn't. On the long list of great head kick KOs, you gotta give a shout out to this brutal finish from Pete Williams over the legendary Mark Coleman. But when you're packing that kind of muscle, natural or otherwise, and you find yourself as tired as he was, getting those massive arms up in time to defend your chin is going to be tough. So when Williams opted to go for the head kick, there was no need for a follow-up. As good a head kick finish as the UFC has ever seen. But trust us, there's more to come in this video. You know you're a great power puncher when your fist has its own nickname. And after listening to Michael Bisping talk trash for weeks on end as they filmed The Ultimate Fighter together, it was clear that Dan Henderson was going to enjoy landing his H-bomb on the Brit to shut him up for good. And with UFC 100 as the stage, that's exactly what happened. You're just not going to see a better overhand punch than this one, folks. This was a payback punch, a real piece of justice carried out by Hendo. And he enjoyed it so much that he decided to add one more blow just to make sure. A flying forearm smash. Hilariously, Henderson would make that image his merchandising logo, while admitting that he knew that Bisping was out cold. Told you there'd be more head kicks. And for our money, this one is just about as good as it ever got in MMA. And while the execution here was truly awesome, it's the context that really made Leon Edwards' 5th round KO of Kamaru Usman what it was. He was down on the scorecards with the title on the line, and just 1 minute away from a defeat that would no doubt shut him out of the title picture for a long time. But in that moment, Leon Rocky Edwards managed to live up to his nickname, producing a movie-like turn of events that even Sylvester Stallone would be happy with. This was MMA's greatest Rocky moment, and the head kick flash KO was just about as crazy a finish as you will ever see. It's one thing to knock out a striker as good as Mirko Krokop, but to KO him with his own move? Yeah, that's another level of impressive. You all know the saying, right leg hospital, left leg cemetery? Well, Gonzaga was in no way afraid of Krokop's legendary kicking prowess, and in a moment of pure inspiration, he decided to take aim at Mirko with his own favorite technique. And the collision here, considering these are two massive heavyweights? Yeah, this might just be the single greatest head kick in UFC history. It literally came out of nowhere. But as soon as it landed, its place in the MMA history books was sealed. And finally, the king of all flash KOs comes in to close the show. When Conor McGregor was lined up to take on José Aldo, there were more than a few fans and analysts who thought that he had what it took to finally defeat the longtime featherweight king. But who could have predicted just how easy he would make it look? 10 seconds had barely passed, and the Irishman was delivering fight-ending hammer fists to close the show after dropping the champ with a short left hand. It was the counter shot to end all counter shots, a 13-second KO that to this day remains the fastest finish in the UFC title fight history. And if we're totally honest, we're guessing this record is going to stand the test of time. A truly remarkable knockout from the biggest star in the history of the sport.